So I procrastinated on doing this video because many people are extremely passionate about vitamin C. Believe it or not, there are some radical vitamin C enthusiasts or even zealots out there, and they won't be happy with me unless I say vitamin C is a cure for cancer or something crazy like that. But let's talk about that. Let's talk about everything relating to vitamin C, the cancer, the collagen, the foods, the I.V.s, the supplements, the doses. And to start with, the two-time Nobel Prize winner, Linus Pauling, wrote a book in the 1970s called Vitamin C and the Common Cold, where he advocated taking megadoses of vitamin C, up to 10 grams per day. And the main goal of Linus Pauling with these megadoses was to enhance white blood cells, also known as immune cells, and he wrote about using the megadoses of vitamin C to kill cancer cells also. Now, Linus Pauling also discussed and performed actual experiments using IV vitamin C for cancer, which is very interesting, and I'll explain why. So first, most animals make their own vitamin C inside their bodies, and they make it from sugar, from glucose. So animals essentially take candy and make it into vitamin C inside their bodies, which is pretty wild. Now keep in mind, all plants have glucose because the whole purpose of photosynthesis is to make glucose. And then animals can take this glucose and make it into vitamin C. In other words, for most animals, vitamin C is not actually a vitamin. By definition, a vitamin is something our bodies need, but we cannot produce it inside our bodies. So creatine, for example, is a nutrient. Creatine is an amazing muscle-building nutrient. But creatine is not a vitamin because our bodies can make creatine from scratch. But humans, Neanderthals, monkeys, apes, guinea pigs, and certain bats and certain fish cannot make vitamin C. So for us, it is a true vitamin. And once again, most animals make vitamin C from glucose, which is wild. You can see it explained in the detail here in this scientific study where glucose gets converted to glucose 6-phosphate. Pretty basic sugar energy production initiation. And then that can get converted to L-gluconate. Again, normal biochemistry. But here's where most animals convert the L-gluconate into L-galanogamma-lactone. L-galanogamma-lactone via an oxidase enzyme. And then the final vitamin C is produced. And here's what I want to point out in this image. Humans, Neanderthals, primates, guinea pigs, some bats, and also some fish have a pseudogene for L-galanolactone oxidase enzyme, meaning our genes got lazy and stopped making vitamin C. We built up so many mutations on this oxidase gene, it became a pseudogene, meaning it doesn't produce a functioning enzyme protein. Why would this happen, you ask? It's because our diets had so much vitamin C, we didn't need to produce it, and the gene became inactivated from built-up mutations over thousands of years. Anyway, the key point here is vitamin C is made from glucose, and vitamin C is very similar to glucose sugar. When I was at Boston University Medical School for 5 years, I had a good friend named Chris, and we'd go to the Dunkin' Donuts together to get coffee. Now, I'm a black coffee guy, but Chris always had the coffee shop put 2 pumps of straight glucose syrup into his large Dunkin' coffee. That's glucose in real life. And why am I latching onto this glucose thing? Because of the Warburg effect. So let's shout out Otto Heinrich Warburg, another Nobel Prize winner, similar to Linus Pauling. So we're standing on the shoulders of giants here. Otto Warburg discovered the Warburg effect, which is largely ignored by cancer doctors, oncologists. And this Warburg effect is ignored all around the world to this day. If you ask your doctor about the Warburg effect, they'll say, they've heard of it, but they don't know anything about it, or they're not doing anything about it. At least 90% of the doctors will say things like this. Yet we've known about the Warburg effect since the 1930s. It pisses me off to no end when people have cancer and they're admitted to the best of the best rated hospitals for various types of medical treatments. And then they are fed carbs, and more carbs with a side of orange juice or Dunkin' Donuts coffee with glucose syrup. And nobody mentions to them the Warburg effect. The Warburg effect is a metabolic quirk where cancer cells feed on glucose. even when they should otherwise be burning fat for energy. In other words, if you have heart cells or kidney cells or liver cells and you're growing them in a dish, you can feed those cells fats or sugars and they survive just fine. Put some coconut oil in there, the cells keep growing. Put some sugar, they grow also. This is called metabolic flexibility. The cells in your body have the ability to burn sugar or fats. But if you have cancer cells growing in a petri dish, you can only feed them glucose sugar. They die if you try to give them fats for fuel, which is a nod to the older Joseph Mercola book emphasizing a diet which combats cancer, which I used to recommend, but now I'm seeing his new, which took a weird 180-degree turn. But we don't need to go there. I'm just mentioning that it's weird. The point is, cancer cells feed on glucose. And sadly, almost all the cell studies done in medical journals are done using cancer cells because cancer cells grow super fast. So almost all the scientific research promotes high carb diets and lots of sugar, and a calorie is just a calorie nonsense because they're studying cancer cells growing in labs like the world famous HeLa cells. If you want to do more reading on this, look up HeLa cells. So when Linus Pauling comes along and says, hey, let's give people with cancer high dose vitamin C, it makes logical sense. If you have cancer, the cells are vacuuming up glucose, sugar, and vitamin C. It's a close cousin to glucose. This full story gets a bit complicated here because in our blood, we have oxygen. And vitamin C gets oxidized into dehydroascorbic acid, which is also called DHA, just to confuse you. And this DHA is actually taken up into the cells, and then the DHA, the dehydro, gets converted back into vitamin C. But the point is, this happens via the glucose transporter, GLUT1, which is massively increased during cancer. So you deplete your vitamin C when you have cancer because the cancer cells are vacuuming vitamin C up along with all that glucose syrup. Furthermore, this is a scientific review from 2016 on the anti-cancer effects of vitamin C revisited, and they show that when DHA is at a high enough level, it uses up all the NADPH and actually increases the reactive oxygen species. That's what ROS stands for, reactive oxygen. Basically the opposite of an antioxidant. And this can kill cancer cells with these high doses. That's why they call it a double-edged sword in this study, because vitamin C is an antioxidant, but high doses leads to more oxidation inside cells. It increases reactive oxygen. The problem with this is you don't want to do these high vitamin C doses if you're healthy. It increases your kidney stone risk, for example, depending on your genes, of course, which I analyze professionally. And high vitamin C doses can cause significant kidney, heart, and metabolic toxicity, even brain toxicity at high doses, because the same thing that happens in cancer cells can happen in your heart or in your brain at crazy high doses. This is similar to methylene blue, by the way. It's an electron donor and an electron acceptor, depending on the dose. So using megadose vitamin C for cancer and for fighting a temporary infection or sickness, those are the only justifications for using high-dose vitamin C, in my opinion. I know the comments are going to buzz with people saying they do it all the time, but not everybody has perfect heart disease risk genes or perfect brain genes where their bodies can handle this stuff in perpetuity. But anyway, let's look at Linus Pauling's actual 1976 cancer study with the IV vitamin C. The paper was called Supplemental Ascorbate, which means vitamin C, in the supportive treatment of cancer. And they took 100 people dying of cancer, they had terminal cancer, and they gave them 10 grams per day of IV vitamin C for 10 days. And then Linus Pauling switched them over to 10 grams per day orally, 2.5 grams 4 times per day for perpetual maintenance. They never stopped with the oral 10 grams, in case you're wondering. Next, they compared these 100 people to 1,000 people that did not get vitamin C. And the vitamin C people survived 4 times longer, 210 days on average compared to the 50-day average. This is quite amazing, but Mayo Clinic, where I used to work until I had to quit because they started forcing people to get the COVID vaccine, Mayo Clinic apparently tried to replicate this study and it failed. So it's hard to say what's the full story here. Now, ironically, I want to show you a clip from a video I made in 2021 when I quit Mayo Clinic, and I gave this as one of my top 5 reasons for quitting. And really the 5th reason I'm quitting Mayo Clinic is because they have soda fountains. It's that simple. If you go to the cafeteria, soda fountains. If you go down the hallways, vending machines, soda fountains. What's one thing that pretty much every scientist agrees on? Soda is bad. Like, Americans have much too high blood sugar, much too high obesity, much too high diabetes. It's rising, it's rising, it's rising. Even in children, they're basically selling cigarettes there, and they're pretending like they're optimizing people's health. Now, it's nice to see Dr. Eric Berg commenting on that video, by the way. But what I'm thinking here is Mayo Clinic was feeding their cancer patients a high sugar or high carb diet, the standard American diet, same as they do to this day. So the vitamin C wasn't effective in that context because it was competing with all that Dunkin' Donuts syrup. In fact, I just remembered that Mayo Clinic has this massive multi-story building called the Dan Abraham Healthy Living Center, and it was gifted to Mayo Clinic by Dan Abraham in 1980, or in the 80s. Now, Dan Abraham is the founder of Slim Fast.
Losing weight has never been so convenient. Wherever I am, I can have my shake. Ah, icy cold and delicious. Who says you can't take it with you?
Ultra Slim Fast,
which at that time was literally just high fructose corn syrup with some flavors and synthetic vitamins. I remember drinking that shit a long time ago. And even today, sugar is the #1 ingredient in Slim Fast. So they've switched from high fructose corn syrup to sugar, so now it's extra healthy. But again, Mayo Clinic already has some shady connections to these things. And the way people ate in the Mayo Clinic study with megadoses of vitamin C probably gave rise to poor results when they did their vitamin C study versus the original 1976 Linus Pauling study. Like Hippocrates in ancient Greece used to say, 400 years before Christ, let food be thy medicine. Modern medical institutions have strayed a long ways from that today with all the various cancers that are increasing in rates every year. But let's go back to the vitamin C. Basically, it appears like it won't hurt to try high dose IV vitamin C if you have cancer, but only in the context of a low carb keto diet. And maybe if you're sick. So let's talk about immune cells and your immune system and vitamin C. So first, it's important to remember that 70 to 80% of our entire immune system hovers around your gut. So it shouldn't be surprising when we find relatively new research that concludes the beneficial effects of vitamin C supplementation may be attributed to modulation of the gut microbiome, meaning vitamin C increases your good gut bacteria populations, and that's going to help your immune system stay calm and carry on. Next, in the event of an actual infection, vitamin C accumulates in neutrophils, which are immune cells that eat bad bacteria and viruses, and this enhances microbial killing. Helps your immune system fight. Vitamin C is also needed for apoptosis and clearance of the spent neutrophils. And it enhances differentiation and proliferation of B and T cells, meaning vitamin C leads to higher numbers of immune cells, while deficiency in vitamin C leads to impaired immunity. So the research on immune function and immune system improvement is clear and well known and well studied. You've probably heard about the benefits of vitamin C for your immune system. It's commonly discussed. It's legit. Now, in this same review study, they also mentioned the specific doses. For prevention, they recommended adequate amounts of 100 to 200 milligrams per day, which may optimize cell and tissue levels over time. In contrast, when you get sick, they say it requires significantly higher gram doses of vitamin C to compensate for the increased inflammatory response and metabolic demand. So I'd recommend, and I personally take, at least 1 gram, preferably 5 grams per day of vitamin C when I'm fighting off a cold or any type of virus or sickness. But different people have different kidney stone risks and things, so you always need to use common sense here. As far as foods go for maintaining vitamin C, here is my food data. And the theme here is clearly peppers, peppers, and more peppers. If you want to get above 100 milligrams of vitamin C with foods, use peppers. And we grow peppers in our garden. Here's a picture of it, and I'll try to take a video next year because my wife crushes it on gardening, and this picture doesn't even do it justice. But even peppers are under 500 milligrams. So if you want to take 5 grams when you're sick, you need to buy a supplement. Preferably something without sugar, because sugar competes with vitamin C, and sugar gives you cavities in your teeth, and on and on. I also look for vitamin C without fake sweeteners like sucralose, which is surprisingly hard to find, especially if you're into the chewable vitamin Cs. Now, rose hips are the #1 food source for vitamin C, so if you want to take food-based supplement pills, you can buy a straight-up rose hip supplement. And be sure to watch out for those fake food colorings in all your supplements, especially chewables. I have a 0 tolerance policy for food coloring in supplements. You should too. The sugar is okay in small quantities if you're taking the supplements with food, but the food coloring is completely unnecessary and completely insane. Anytime you wonder specifically what I use, check out my website, ajconsultingcompany.com/what-I-use. Now, we've talked about cancer. We've talked about immune boosting. What else? Well, we can't finish the video without acknowledging the brain effects and the skin benefits. Vitamin C is literally a necessary molecule when your body is producing and creating collagen, which is obviously critical for protecting against skin wrinkles. So that's good. And vitamin C can be dermally absorbed, meaning you could absorb it through your skin with a cream. But this is critically dependent on the type of vitamin C. Specifically, the formulation needs to have a pH below 3.5, meaning strongly acidic. And even then, only about 20% is absorbed. So I'm a bigger fan of the oral vitamin C, for what it's worth. And vitamin C is involved in making collagen because vitamin C allows the amino acid proline to get turned into hydroxyproline, which is a necessary building block for collagen. It also does this with lysine, turning it into hydroxylysine, another unique building block for collagen. So vitamin C pushes your body to make collagen. That's the point. Obviously excellent news. And this is why when ancient sailors would get scurvy from low vitamin C, they would get scurvy skin, where their skin would peel, and you also can get weird gum problems from the extreme lack of collagen, ultimately from vitamin C deficiencies. And that brings up another time and place you might want to megadose vitamin C. If you got sunburned and your skin is peeling, or you have a skin issue, give your skin some support. Also, don't get sunburned in the first place, obviously. And another thing about scurvy that most people don't know is it causes irritability and neurological issues. This is because vitamin C is essential for the synthesis of your neurotransmitters, your brain chemicals, especially dopamine and norepinephrine, the fight or flight hormone. This research study, for example, illustrates that ascorbic acid, vitamin C, is neuroprotective in the brain. And you'll notice the glucose, GLUT1 uptake proteins, the same exact GLUT1 we discussed while talking about cancer. So the brain is vacuuming up vitamin C, just like cancer cells do. And this is why when you look at tissue concentrations of vitamin C, you see the pituitary has crazy high levels because dopamine travels via the hypothalamic pituitary portal system. And of course, vitamin C is super high in immune cells, like lymphocytes and monocytes. And also, vitamin C is concentrated in the adrenal gland, where norepinephrine, fight or flight hormones, are produced. So now you know why. I think it's an amazing vitamin. I'm sure we could go through detail after detail after detail about vitamin C for hours, especially on the secondary effects of vitamin C. In other words, because it helps with your collagen, it's going to protect your arteries and your blood vessels because your arteries have a lot of collagen, things like that. But that falls into collagen, in the collagen category. Just like muscle healing or wound healing would fall into the collagen category as well. Those are secondary effects. In fact, if you get creative, you can see how hundreds of examples would arise just from the benefits of vitamin C in the production of collagen. But again, those would be considered secondary benefits, not primary benefits from vitamin C. So overall, my aim here was to give you some of the major bullet points regarding cancer immune function, skin collagen, brain health, and hormones, along with the specific doses, including the times and places where you might want to consider megadoses. And I'm always going to sneak in some information about the corruption in modern medicine, just because you need to know about that stuff. And let's just take a moment of silence to remember that Fauci completely ignored the medical studies showing vitamin C reduced COVID-19 hospital mortality.
As attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science.
Yeah, you can never get a moment of silence when he's near a screen. I'll see you in the comments.